Hello everybody. Have you ever wondered what the magic is behind gearing a vehicle? Have you ever wanted to decode the mystery behind it? Well, there is an answer, and it's called the Stanlick Formula. It's a formula that I developed to optimize gearing ratios in any transmission for any vehicle that uses discrete gear ratios. And it's very straightforward, very simple. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through that. But before that, I want to show you what the stock behavior of this vehicle's gearbox is like. As you can see here in these graphs, you have the shift point graph here, where my mouse is. Then you have the power and torque graph here when you're shifting. Here is the dynograph for the engine. And this is a very important thing, because the most important thing for this is, the most important aspect is to pay attention to your engine's performance characteristics and where its happy place is. So we can see immediately that from about just under 8,000 all the way to about 9,600 RPM, the engine has a very flat power curve. It's very happy here, so we're going to try to keep it in this range. Now, let's go ahead on the left side here and increase the maximum RPM that the engine can reach. So we can see the whole graph. So let's bring that out to 10,500. And we can see that there's a very sharp fall off at about 9,500 RPM, give or take. So what we're going to do is get rammed by somebody who just, wow. Fantastic. What we're going to do is we're going to see where the shift points are for the stock gearbox, and then we're going to go ahead and optimize the car using the Stanlick formula. So let's respawn and give her some gas. Ooh, fifth gear is pretty broken. Oh. Excuse my terrible driving. Oh my goodness. Alright, let's try that again. The shifting doesn't look too bad, but definitely 5th and 6th gear are pretty broken. So this is what we're gonna do. After we reach the end here, I'm going to go ahead and just bam. Oh, hi guys. Alright. So that was pretty meh. That was definitely suboptimal. So we're going to go to the configuration again. We're going to go to the tuning. First thing I'm going to do is, since we already have the whole dynograph here, and I see there's a sharp fall off at about 9,500, I'm going to go ahead and bring the RPM limiter down to about 9,500, like that, and there we go. Let's make it 9,550. There we go. So there's a little bit of that fall off there. So when it comes to gearing a vehicle, it's not necessarily about making sure it's in peak power all the time. What's more important is making sure that your average power that you're producing is as high as possible, because combustion engines do not have a linear power output. Another thing too is people also like to focus on torque, but I'm going to tell you right now, as a physicist and with learning some things from mechanical engineering I've been working with, torque is irrelevant when it comes to maximizing your acceleration potential once your vehicle is already at speed. What you want to do is you want to focus on power. Ignore torque completely when it comes to once your vehicle's already at speed. Torque is important when you're going from a standstill, because torque is twisting force, torque is volumetric efficiency, so you want as much of that grunt as possible from a standstill. But once you're moving, you want to go power. So right now, this range here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten the range we've been working with that default gearbox, especially from gear 5, like 4, 5, and 6. They got pretty broken near the end. that's more of a arithmetic progression, and I have what is called in my formula. It produces what's called an asymptotic progression. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize the screen here. I will have a link to this in the video description. But essentially, this is a calculator for my formula that the mechanical engineer Jay helped me out with. I added all the descriptions. He rearranged some things in my formula, basically to make it more digestible to the user. Because my original paper that I had written, there's a bit more sloppiness, I suppose you could say, that goes into it. Some of my work here, the mechanical engineer Jay and we are working on a paper together to fully publish the Stanlick Formula, and it will be renamed the Stanlick Formula, because his last name is Lucen and my last name is Stanlick, and we're going to go ahead and just smash them together, and because we've done a lot of work together and found out some pretty cool stuff, mathematically speaking, and engineering speaking as well. So we're going to publish that. I don't know when. It's still a work in progress. There's a lot of integral calculus and differential equations and Euler-Lagrange equations, calculus variations. So there's a lot of nerdy stuff going into it. But essentially, math, as is the case with everything, does not lie. And as long as you know how to speak the language, you can make it say whatever you want, as long as it models the real world accurately. That's where myself, the physicist, comes in, where it's like, well, we want to model things accurately. And this does exactly that. So R1 here is your first gear. For R1, we're going to go ahead and just pick any number, really. It depends on how well you want to launch off the line and what scenario you're working with. Right now, we're working with a performance scenario where we want to minimize time on the track. So that means that we don't really want to focus on off-the-line acceleration as much as we do want to focus on our acceleration potential once we're already at speed. So typically for track vehicles, you'll see a first ratio of about 3 or lower. It'd be in a range of like 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 in the first gear for a track vehicle is usually what you'll see. Rally cars and things like that might have a higher first gear, like 4, and then if you're hauling heavy loads and you're dealing with a vehicle that's not necessarily meant for pure velocity, but for pulling force, the ability to haul heavy stuff, then they'll have a much larger torque multiplication for first gear. And really all that matters is once you pick a gear, in this case I'll pick 3 because I like a round number, then you pick how many gears there are in your transmission. We have 6 gears, so we'll just leave it there. All my defaults are 3, 6, and everything. So, and let's see, our RPM before shifting. This is very important. Remember on the power band here, your RPM before you shift should be slightly higher than the RPM at which you produce peak power. So here we can see we're making about 1,600 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. I'm kind of eyeballing it, but it clips the top of the graph there, 8,000 RPM. So that's what we'll aim for. So, and then our rev limiter is at 9,550. So instead of just doing around 1,000 after peak RPM, peak power RPM, I'm going to go ahead and make it all the way to redline because again, that's a very flat power curve. So we'll put in 550 here for 9,550. And then our RPM after the shift. Now this RPM should always be slightly lower than your peak power because when you're shifting your engine, you want it to be such that your acceleration is also as smooth as possible. Because you can have very hard well, okay. That was hilarious. Just absolute chaos. So your so your engine You want it to be so that when you shift into the next gear, you're always slightly lower than your peak power RPM, because then you'll be guaranteed to hit your peak power RPM because you're accelerating. You'll want to be slightly lower. Since we're in a performance scenario, I'm going to say 7,500. We'll do 500 RPM below peak power RPM, which was 8,000, right? So let's see. Our first gear was 3. The number of gears we have is 6. The shifting RPM, the RPM before shifting is 9,550, and the RPM after shifting is 7,500. These variables, we're going to skip that for now in the video. I'll have a link to this calculator in the description, and you guys can go ahead and get into the meat of all that if you'd like. This is just for demonstration purposes. And yeah, here's my formula, and here are the results it spit out. So this is the perfect gear ratio progression for the vehicle, at least for the parameters I put into it. So first gear is going to be 3, second gear is 2.35, 6, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put those numbers in. Luckily, I have a preset configuration for this vehicle in this game. And it already has those values set for the transmission. So as you can see on the left side here, it's 3, 2.36, 1.94, 1.65, 1.43, and 1.27. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to drive the vehicle, and we're going to see how it performs on the graphs. Oh, if I can get out of this spot here. Okay. Let's go from a standstill. She does take a while. So I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but especially looking at the shift point graph, you can certainly see how we're dealing with an asymptotic progression, where the gap between first and second is the largest, second and third is smaller, third and fourth is smaller still, etc. And that's exactly what you want for any situation when you're trying to maximize the output of your engine, or take maximum advantage of the output of your engine. This is for anything. Whether it's a rally car, especially a drag racer, because they use the exact same sort of method, where you have wider spacing in the lower gears and progressively shorter spacing in the higher gears. And that's exactly what an asymptotic progression will yield, as you can see in my formula. And that's why it's called asymptotic gearing plot. And again, my friend Jay and I were working on publishing a paper that goes into the hardcore math and all of this, but essentially it'll spit out the perfect ratios for you given the parameters you input into the formula. Again, you know, I could make this 7,800 RPM, and there are my ratios. 3, 2.45. Last gear is a little high, and that's the thing you have to pay attention to when you're messing with how all this works. Especially in a car like this that only has 6 gears, if we had 7 or 8 gears, that's a lot more manageable, because an 8th gear is a lot less overdriven, or underdriven, rather. So you have more top speed potential there to work with. Well, we only have, and plus our engines, if we shift at 7,800, we're not gonna maximize the amount of time, the net amount of power we produce. Okay, so if you say we do this, let me demonstrate this. So our peak power RPM is 8,000, right? Well, what if we make the before shift 8,500, or the after shift 8,500, and the before shift, let's make that 7,500. Oh no, that's, our engine is not capable of that. Okay, yeah, so as you can see here, this gearing is very short. If we have only a 500 RPM difference between peak power RPM, both before and after shift, you'll see how short the gearing becomes. It's incredibly short, and that is not going to be good, because then with the last gear, this high, we're going to have to stretch out that final drive to the point where our first gear might be at something crazy like 150 miles an hour. So that's something else to consider. Also, what you'll have to note is that the higher your first gear, watch 7th gear there. You see how the whole graph elevates? It scales accordingly to whatever your first gear is. So this is what you have to pay attention to. Now, what's really cool is that no matter what your first gear is, you can make it something random like 3.22 or 4. And no matter what it is, if you know your engine's performance characteristics, like we did for this car, that's 9550 for before shift RPM, and it was at 7500 for after shift RPM. You'll see that the spacing between the gears does not change. All that changes is that first gear, with how the math works. So you can try. So it's always going to shift at a point where it's like, hey, before shifting 9550, after shifting 7500. But again, that's only for first to second gear, and that's where these variables come in. It'll scale that drop coefficient accordingly, and then it will get progressively smaller until the nth gear, which is again exactly what you want in a vehicle. So now that we have everything optimized, I'm going to go ahead back to the game, and pay attention to the orange line when I shift into the next gear, and where it progresses through each sequence of each gear. And how we're maximizing that whole power band there. Oh, that's if I can actually let me not burn out. Okay, let's go again. All right. Now I'm going to demonstrate something else here. This is just for so you guys can see what happens if we do something like let the RPM just run out all the way to the max. So let me bring it to 10,500 at red line, and now look at the speed that we're going to reach once we top out 6th gear. Because remember, we have this really sharp drop off in power at about 9,500, and in 6th gear, when we're at like 230 miles an hour, we're going to be at around 9,500. So just watch what happens to our speed and the graph once we reach that threshold. Woo! I might have to adjust the gearing. I'll make it a little shorter, because right now I have the gearing perfect for the top speed I want to reach, and I'll walk you guys through that as well. But let's just make the final drive a lot shorter, and then you'll get my point. So let's go. Look at the power. Look at the power output at max RPM. We're only producing 300 horsepower at max RPM right now. On the graph here, it's this number where my mouse is. When you let the engine go all the way like that, it severely limits its power output, because you have that very sharp drop off. Now that's in games like this where you had to pay attention to how your what your engine's characteristics are and where exactly you want that rev limiter to be. Other racing games, some of them don't give you that level of customization. So, but basic rule of thumb, goes for any other racing game or in real life where it's like, hey, here's my power curve. Let me maximize the net power that the net output my engine is creating versus focusing on peak power solely. As long as your peak power is within that range and that range is set optimally, your engine is going to be a very happy engine. She's going to be purring like a kitten. You can make any car sound like an F1 car because of how well optimized it will end up being for maximizing that power output. This guy's bullying me. Why is he bullying me? Dude, fuck off. Oh my gosh. Can he read my license plate? I bet he can't keep up. So yeah, I'm gonna also show you guys how I calculated my top speed. And it's exactly like this. So what I did is I went to my vehicle configuration. I went to my final drive. I made that 6. I just maxed it out, and that's after I optimized my transmission with these ratios. Okay. I slammed my final drive all the way to the right. Then I just went to see where my car topped out at. And it tops out at about 103 miles an hour. So then we just do some simple math, okay? My car tops out at 103 miles an hour at a ratio of 6.0. You do 6 times 103, right, is 618. Then you divide that product by whatever you want your top speed to be. I want my top speed to be 230 miles an hour. And that gives me a final ratio of 2.686 or 2.69. Let's round it up. Okay? So then we can go back to Beam here, which is the game, and I can show you my vehicle configuration. Vehicle configuration. I can go to this. I can load my preset. And you can see my final drive right here is set to 2.69. And I top out at exactly 230 miles an hour. So that's just a quick way to set your top speed wherever you want it to be. And you can do that per track too. If there's a track where you're reaching only 180 miles an hour down the straight, you just do the math for that. That's your when you slam your final drive and then what your car tops out at, you take that product and divide it by whatever top speed you want it to be. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do a quick lap around the circuit, and so you guys can kind of see how the engine performs. Another thing that I want you guys to note is that it's much more beneficial to have your engine optimized for straight line acceleration versus trying to adjust gears for specific corners. The reason why is because, again, off the line is not as important as your ability to maintain acceleration once you're already moving, especially in a racing scenario, like out of corners and things of that sort. With these progressions, when you optimize an engine for its power band and everything, like I just walked you guys through, for these progressions, they're already wider spaced in the lower gears. So the gears are already optimally set. You don't have to do any adjustment after the math has done all the work. Again, math doesn't lie. If the results are not what you quite want, then you should have to reconsider the parameters that you put into the formula. Another thing I would like to demonstrate is that if you want a more economical situation, let me just go there. If you want to accommodate a more economical situation, all you have to do is lower the after shift RPM. So for instance, if I don't want the most ultimately optimized engine and I want some fuel savings, I can go ahead and I can just drop this before shift or after shift RPM. And as you can see, my gears will scale accordingly. Don't worry about this. This is just math happening over here. This is what we're focusing on, the parent function, not the inverse. But if my engine, you don't really have to trust your red line when it comes to fuel savings and stuff, you can keep that wherever you want it, really. And then this is what you should have to modulate. So the lower I make this, you'll see the harder it scales everything to converge at 0 much more rapidly after first gear into second gear. Versus if I bring up the RPM after shift, it'll make the whole spread flatter, or in a physics word, isomorphic. You want an isomorphic spread with that advantage of asymptotic progression for every and all racing scenarios, and again, especially drag racing. But as part of my ramblings, I think I was saying that it's more beneficial to optimize for straight line acceleration and then just adjust your final drive for the top speed you can reach at a given track, and then to try to adjust the ratios for specific corners, because you're going to lose out everywhere else. And this is based off of the calculus of variations. Again, we talk about this in our paper. It's a section that I'm writing right now. That along with the Euler-Lagrange derivations. And Jay's working on some other stuff too. So we'll get that out there for sure. Just, in the meantime, you can play around with that calculator that I'll have a link to in the video description, and you can see exactly what the optimum transition for your engine will look like, whether it's 6 gears, 4 gears, a million gears. It could be anything really, because that's how I designed it. Where the default limit I set was from 2 to 10 gears, but you can go higher than 10. You can't have less than 2 gears, because that's not a gearbox. That's just a single speed. And at that point, you're really just dealing with trying to accommodate a ratio curve with just 1 point, which isn't possible. It'll be complete function collapse. If I match it, it just becomes a straight line, and then everything collapses to 0, and it becomes undefined because it's trying to literally do infinity. We know math doesn't like infinity, so yeah. But if you really want to nerd out, you can get into the meat of this calculator here. I have another one here for the last method, but that's something else I'll talk about later. This is really the superior method here as far as how all the mathematics works out. Let me know what you guys think, because this takes out all the guesswork entirely. This eliminates all the empirical gobbledygook. This eliminates all the guesswork. It's literally just plug and play. As you saw, hey, here's my engine's power band. Oh my gosh, I wanted to not go any lower than 7,000. Input that into the formula. Oh my gosh, it redlines at 9550, but the power curve is pretty flat, so I can actually just let it run out. Okay, cool, put that into the formula. Oh my gosh, I want my first gear to be 3 to 1, and I have 6 gears. Okay, and then, bam, boop, there it is. Those are your ratios, because math is awesome. Alright guys, thank you so much. Let me know what you think.